The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of the small apartment in East Cleveland, casting long shadows across the worn carpet where 54-year-old Charles Chuck Davis sat at his kitchen table, carefully reviewing a resume he had updated countless times over the past 18 months. The document seemed to mock him with its employment gap, a stark reminder of how long he had been searching for work since the automotive parts factory where he'd spent 26 years had closed permanently. Chuck's weathered hands, still strong despite his age, trembled slightly as he adjusted his reading glasses to examine every detail of the resume one more time. At 6 feet tall, with graying temples and the broad shoulders of a man who had spent decades in manual labor, Chuck carried himself with a dignity that unemployment hadn't been able to diminish, though it had certainly tested. The apartment around him was modest, but meticulously clean, reflecting the same attention to detail that had made him a valued supervisor at the factory. Family photos lined the walls, chronicling the journey of his son Michael from childhood through college graduation, marriage, and his recent promotion to regional manager at a mid-sized tech company in downtown Cleveland. Chuck's phone buzzed with a text message from Michael. "Dad, are you ready for today? I'm really excited about this opportunity for you. Meet me at the office at 2 p.m. "This is going to work out great." The message filled Chuck with a mixture of hope and apprehension that had become familiar over the past few weeks since Michael had first broached the subject of a potential job at his company. It wasn't the kind of work Chuck was used to. Michael's company provided IT support and digital solutions to small businesses, but Michael had insisted that Chuck's supervisory experience and work ethic would translate well to managing the company's maintenance and facilities operations. "Dad, I've been watching you struggle to find work for over a year," Michael had said during their conversation 3 weeks earlier. "It's killing me to see someone with your experience and dedication being passed over because of your age. My company is growing, and we need someone trustworthy to oversee our facilities. It's perfect for you." Chuck had been hesitant at first, worried about the appearance of nepotism and concerned about putting Michael in an awkward position with his colleagues. But after another week of fruitless job applications and interviews that seemed to end the moment potential employers calculated his age, Chuck had agreed to let Michael arrange an informal meeting. "It's not charity, Dad," Michael had reassured him. "It's smart business. We need someone with your skills, and you need a job. The fact that you're my father just makes it easier for me to vouch for your character." Now, as Chuck prepared for what Michael had described as a casual introduction to the team, he felt the familiar mixture of hope and anxiety that accompanied every potential job opportunity. At 54, he was far from ready to retire, but the job market seemed to have decided that his 3 decades of experience were less valuable than the perceived energy and adaptability of younger workers. Chuck showered and dressed carefully in his best suit, a navy blue ensemble that he'd purchased for Michael's college graduation 6 years earlier, and that still fit well despite the stress-induced weight loss of recent months. He polished his shoes until they gleamed, trimmed his graying beard with precision, and checked his appearance in the mirror with the same attention to detail that had characterized his approach to work throughout his career. The bus ride to downtown Cleveland took 40 minutes, carrying Chuck through neighborhoods that told the story of the city's economic transformation. He passed empty lots where factories once stood, gentrified areas where young professionals had moved into renovated warehouses, and the gleaming downtown core where companies like Michael's represented the new economy that had replaced the manufacturing base that had sustained Chuck's generation. Michael's office building was a modern glass structure in the heart of Cleveland's business district, the kind of place where Chuck felt simultaneously impressed by his son's success and out of place in his own skin. The lobby was filled with young professionals moving with purpose, their clothes and confidence speaking of educational opportunities and career paths that had been largely unavailable to Chuck's generation. Chuck announced himself to the receptionist, a friendly young woman who directed him to the 11th floor, where Michael's company, Tech Solutions Plus, occupied a suite of offices that buzzed with the energy of a growing business. Michael greeted him at the elevator with a warm embrace and obvious pride. At 31, Michael had inherited his father's height and strong build, but his expensive suit and confident demeanor spoke of professional success that Chuck both admired and felt slightly intimidated by. "Dad, you look great," Michael said, stepping back to appreciate Chuck's appearance. "I'm so glad you're here. The team is excited to meet you." As they walked through the office space, Chuck was struck by the youth and energy of Michael's colleagues. The open floor plan was filled with people who appeared to be in their 20s and 30s, working at standing desks with multiple monitors, engaged in conversations that included technical terminology Chuck didn't recognize, and moving through their workday with the kind of casual confidence that seemed to come naturally to people who had never experienced long-term unemployment or age discrimination. "Dad, let me introduce you to the team," Michael said, leading Chuck toward a conference room where several people were already assembled. The group included Michael's immediate supervisor, David Chen, a sharp-looking man in his late 30s who served as the company's operations director, Sarah Williams, the HR manager who appeared to be in her early 40s, and 3 younger employees who Michael introduced as key members of the facilities and support team. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my father, Charles Davis," Michael said with obvious pride. "As I mentioned, Dad has over 25 years of supervisory experience in manufacturing and operations. I think he'd be a perfect fit for our facilities management position." David Chen stepped forward with a professional smile and extended his hand. "Mr. Davis, it's a pleasure to meet you. Michael speaks very highly of your experience and work ethic." Chuck shook hands with each team member, noting the polite but reserved responses he received. Sarah Williams asked a few questions about his background, and the younger employees nodded politely but said little. "Mr. Davis," David said, "why don't we sit down and talk about the position? Michael has given us an overview of your background, but I'd love to hear more about your experience and how you think it might translate to our environment." For the next 30 minutes, Chuck found himself in what felt like an informal interview, describing his experience managing maintenance teams, coordinating with vendors, ensuring compliance with safety regulations, and overseeing the physical operations of a large manufacturing facility. Dad supervised a team of 15 people and was responsible for a facility that operated around the clock, Michael interjected at one point. "He has experience with budgeting, scheduling, vendor relations, and crisis management. Plus, his safety record was impeccable. 0 accidents in his department for over 3 years. Chuck appreciated his son's advocacy, but noticed that the responses from the team remained politely non-committal. David asked thoughtful questions about Chuck's experience with technology systems and his familiarity with modern facilities management software, areas where Chuck admitted he would need some training but expressed confidence in his ability to learn. "Mr. Davis," Sarah said, "what interests you about transitioning from manufacturing to the tech sector?" Chuck considered his answer carefully. "Ms. Williams, I believe that good management principles are universal. Whether you're overseeing a factory floor or an office building, the key is understanding systems, managing people effectively, and solving problems before they become crises. I'm interested in this opportunity because I want to continue contributing my skills in a growing industry and because I believe my experience can bring value to your team." The meeting concluded with polite thanks and promises to discuss the opportunity internally. David shook Chuck's hand again and said they would be in touch within a few days. As they left the conference room, Michael walked Chuck toward the elevator with an expression of cautious optimism. "Dad, I think that went really well. David seemed impressed by your experience, and Sarah asked good questions. I know the age thing might be a concern for some people, but once they see what you can bring to the team, I'm confident they'll see this as a great opportunity." Chuck felt a familiar mixture of hope and skepticism. "Michael, I appreciate you setting this up, but I want you to be honest with me. Do you really think they're going to hire a 54-year-old man when they could hire someone half my age for probably less money?" Michael's expression grew more serious. "Dad, that kind of thinking is exactly what's been holding you back. Yes, age discrimination is real, but it's also illegal. And beyond that, smart companies understand that experience has value. You bring institutional knowledge, reliability, and leadership skills that younger candidates might not have." "I hope you're right, son." "I am right. And Dad, I want you to know that I've already talked to David about this privately. I've told him that hiring you would be one of the best decisions this company could make, and I've put my own reputation on the line, vouching for you." As Chuck rode the elevator down to the lobby, he felt a cautious optimism that he hadn't experienced in months. The position seemed like a good fit for his skills. The salary range Michael had mentioned would allow him to regain his financial footing, and having his son's support and advocacy gave him confidence that this opportunity might actually materialize. But Chuck's optimism was tempered by 18 months of disappointment and rejection. He had learned not to count on anything until an offer was actually in hand, and he had seen too many promising opportunities evaporate when employers decided that his age was a liability rather than an asset. That evening, Chuck called his sister Dorothy in Atlanta to update her on the day's events. "Chuck, that sounds wonderful," Dorothy said after he described the meeting. "It's about time someone recognized your value instead of just seeing your age." "I'm trying not to get my hopes up too much, Dot. You know how these things have been going. But this is different, Chuck. This is Michael's company, and he's vouching for you. That has to count for something." "Maybe. I just don't want to put Michael in an awkward position if this doesn't work out. Chuck, you raised that boy to be successful and decent. If he's willing to put his reputation on the line for you, it's because he knows you're worth it. Trust him, and trust yourself." Then, after ending the call, Chuck sat in his small living room and allowed himself to imagine what it would feel like to be employed again. Not just the financial relief, though that would be enormous, but the sense of purpose, the daily routine, the feeling of contributing something valuable rather than being a burden on the people who loved him. Chuck fell asleep that night with more hope than he'd felt in months, unaware that within 48 hours that hope would be crushed in a way that would force him to confront not only the cruelty of age discrimination, but the painful limits of his son's ability to protect him from a world that had decided he was no longer valuable. 2 days after the meeting at Tech Solutions Plus, Chuck received a call from Michael that filled him with unexpected excitement. "Dad, great news. David wants to move forward with bringing you on board. Can you come in tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for what he's calling a team integration meeting? Basically, it's a chance for you to meet the rest of the facility's staff and get a feel for the day-to-day operations." Chuck felt a surge of relief and gratitude. "Michael, that's wonderful news. I really didn't expect things to move this quickly." "Dad, I told you this was going to work out. David was really impressed with your experience, and Sarah thinks you'd bring exactly the kind of leadership the facilities team needs. This is basically a formality, a chance for the team to meet you before we make it official." "Should I bring anything? References? Additional documentation?" "Just bring yourself, Dad. This is about cultural fit and team dynamics. The position is yours. This is just about making sure everyone's comfortable working together." Chuck spent the evening preparing for what he hoped would be his re-entry into the workforce. He researched Tech Solutions Plus more thoroughly, familiarized himself with industry terminology he might encounter, and practiced answers to questions about his transition from manufacturing to technology support. The next morning, Chuck arrived at the downtown office building 15 minutes early, dressed in his best suit and carrying a leather portfolio that contained extra copies of his resume and a list of references from his previous supervisors. He felt more optimistic than he had in months, buoyed by Michael's confidence and the prospect of finally having steady employment again. Michael met him in the lobby with a smile that seemed slightly forced, though Chuck attributed his son's apparent nervousness to excitement about the day ahead. "Dad, you ready for this? I think today is going to go really well." As they rode the elevator to the 11th floor, Michael briefed Chuck on the people he would be meeting. The facilities team is small but dedicated. There's Janet, who's been handling facilities coordination. She's in her late 20s, but really knows the building systems. Then there's Kevin and Marcus, both in their early 20s, who handle maintenance requests and vendor coordination. They're good people, but they need experienced leadership. When they arrived at the Tech Solutions Plus offices, Chuck noticed that the energy seemed different from his previous visit. Conversations seemed more subdued, and several employees glanced in his direction with expressions he couldn't quite read. Michael led Chuck to a conference room where the facilities team was already assembled. Janet was a petite woman with short brown hair and the kind of efficient demeanor that suggested she took her responsibilities seriously. Kevin and Marcus were both young men who looked like they had recently graduated from college, dressed in the casual but professional attire that seemed standard in the tech industry. David Chen was also present, along with Sarah Williams from HR, and two other managers Chuck hadn't met during his previous visit. "Charles, welcome back," David said, standing to shake hands. "We're excited to discuss how you'd fit into our facilities operations." Chuck settled into his chair, noting that the tone of the meeting felt more formal than he had expected based on Michael's description. What followed was not the informal meet and greet he had anticipated, but rather a structured interview process that seemed designed to test his knowledge and capabilities. "Mr. Davis," Janet began, "can you tell us about your experience with computerized maintenance management systems?" Chuck admitted that his experience was primarily with paper-based systems and basic computer databases, but emphasized his ability to learn new technologies quickly. "What about your familiarity with modern HVAC systems, particularly smart building controls?" Kevin asked. Again, Chuck acknowledged that his experience was with older systems, but stressed his fundamental understanding of building operations and his willingness to adapt to new technologies. The questions continued for 20 minutes, each one highlighting areas where Chuck's experience was dated or where his knowledge didn't align with current industry standards. Chuck began to feel like he was failing a test he hadn't known he was taking. "Dad has supervised teams that managed all of these functions," Michael interjected at one point, clearly sensing that the meeting wasn't going as planned. "His leadership experience and work ethic are exactly what our facilities operations need." Marcus, who had been quiet throughout most of the meeting, leaned forward with a question that felt more like a challenge than an inquiry. "Mr. Davis, no offense, but most of the systems we use here are cloud-based and require pretty advanced technical skills. How confident are you that someone your age can adapt to that kind of environment?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Chuck felt his jaw clench at the casual ageism in Marcus's tone, but he forced himself to respond professionally. "Marcus, I've been learning and adapting throughout my career. Technology changes, but problem-solving skills and leadership capabilities are timeless. I'm confident that I can master whatever systems your operations require." But wouldn't it be easier to hire someone who already knows these systems? Janet asked. Someone who doesn't need training on basic functions. Chuck looked around the room, realizing that what he had thought was a welcoming meeting was actually a systematic dismantling of his candidacy. The questions weren't designed to learn about his capabilities. They were designed to highlight his limitations. "I think what my colleagues are trying to understand," David said, his tone carefully diplomatic, "is how we balance the value of experience with the need for current technical skills. It's a legitimate concern in a rapidly evolving industry." Michael's face had flushed with embarrassment and anger. "David, my father has decades of management experience. These technical skills can be learned, but leadership and reliability can't be taught." "Michael, we appreciate your advocacy for your father," Sarah interjected. "But we need to make decisions based on what's best for the company, not on personal relationships." The implication was clear. Michael's support for his father was seen as nepotism rather than smart business. Kevin spoke up with the kind of casual cruelty that young people sometimes displayed without seeming to realize its impact. "Look, I'm sure Mr. Davis was great at his old job, but this is a different world. We need people who can keep up with the pace of change, not people who need months of training to understand basic systems." "Kevin," Michael said sharply, "you're talking about my father." "I know, and I'm sorry if this sounds harsh, but we have to be realistic. The tech industry moves fast, and we can't afford to slow down for people who can't adapt." Chuck felt the humiliation building in his chest, but it was Marcus who delivered the final blow. "Honestly, and I'm just being real here, we don't need old men who are going to struggle with every new system we implement. We need people who can grow with the company, not people who are going to be constantly asking for help with things that should be automatic." The room fell silent. Marcus had said what everyone else had been thinking but were too polite to articulate directly. Chuck was too old, too set in his ways, too much of a liability for a modern company. Michael's face had gone pale with shock and anger. "Marcus, that's completely inappropriate. You're talking about discrimination based on age, which is illegal." "I'm talking about practical business considerations," Marcus replied, without seeming particularly concerned about the legal implications. "Age is just a number until it starts affecting job performance." David Chen cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. "I think we've covered the key issues here. Charles, thank you for taking the time to meet with the team. We'll discuss this internally and get back to you." Chuck stood up with as much dignity as he could muster, knowing that the decision had already been made and that no amount of internal discussion would change the outcome. "Thank you for your time," Chuck said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside him. "I appreciate the opportunity to learn about your operations." As Chuck gathered his portfolio and prepared to leave, he could hear Michael's angry voice behind him. "David, this is unacceptable. My father is more qualified than anyone in this room to manage facilities operations, and what just happened here is blatant age discrimination." Michael, I understand you're upset, but these are legitimate business concerns." "No, they're not. They're prejudices disguised as business concerns." Chuck paused at the conference room door, torn between pride and the desire to support his son's efforts on his behalf. "Michael," he said quietly, "it's okay. Let's go." "Dad, it's not okay. What they just did to you is wrong, and it's illegal." Marcus spoke up again with the callous confidence of youth. "Look, Michael, your dad seems like a nice guy, but nice doesn't qualify someone for a job they can't do. We don't need charity cases, and we don't need old men who are going to slow down our operations." The words charity cases and old men hit Chuck like physical blows. He had been reduced to a stereotype, his decades of experience dismissed as irrelevant, his age treated as a disqualification rather than an asset. Michael stood up abruptly, his face flushed with anger. "That's enough. Marcus, you're out of line. And David, if this is how this company treats experienced professionals, then maybe I need to reconsider my own position here." "Michael, let's not make this more dramatic than it needs to be," Sarah said. "We're simply trying to make the best hiring decision for the company." Chuck placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Michael, let's go. This conversation is over." As they walked toward the elevator, Chuck could hear fragments of conversation from the conference room, words like unprofessional, family dynamics, and business considerations that made it clear the team was already discussing how to handle the fallout from Michael's defense of his father. The elevator ride to the lobby was silent, with Michael's anger and Chuck's humiliation filling the small space like toxic gas. It wasn't until they reached the street that Michael exploded with fury. "Dad, what they did in there was disgusting. It was age discrimination, plain and simple, and they didn't even try to hide it." Chuck looked at his son, seeing the pain and embarrassment in Michael's eyes, and realized that his humiliation had become Michael's humiliation as well. "Michael, I appreciate you defending me, but I don't want this to affect your job." "Dad, how can you be so calm about this? They basically called you worthless because of your age." "Because I've heard it before, son. Maybe not as directly, but I've heard it. This is what the job market looks like for people my age. It's not right, and it's not legal." Chuck stopped walking and turned to face his son on the busy Cleveland sidewalk, with office workers and young professionals hurrying past them, all presumably secure in their employment and their future prospects. "Michael, you promised me a job. You told me this was going to work out. You put your reputation on the line for me, and now we both look foolish." Michael's expression crumbled. "Dad, I believed they would see your value once they met you. I thought my recommendation would carry more weight. Son, you can't protect me from the world. You can't make people see past my age to my experience, and you can't promise me things that aren't in your power to deliver." Chuck felt the weight of 18 months of unemployment, countless rejections, and now this public humiliation pressing down on him like a physical force. "I need to go home, Michael. And you need to go back to work and try to repair whatever damage this has done to your relationships with your colleagues." "Dad, I'm not going back up there today. I can't face those people after what they said to you." "Yes, you are, because you have a job to do and a career to protect. Don't let my problems become your problems." As Chuck walked toward the bus stop, leaving his son standing on the sidewalk, he felt more defeated than he had at any point since losing his job at the factory. It was one thing to be rejected by strangers who didn't know his capabilities. It was another thing entirely to be humiliated in front of his son by people who had dismissed him as too old and too irrelevant to deserve basic respect. The bus ride home took 40 minutes, but it felt like a journey through the ruins of his remaining hope and dignity. Chuck stared out the window at the passing neighborhoods, thinking about Marcus's casual cruelty, Kevin's dismissive attitude, and the way the entire room had treated him like a burden rather than a qualified candidate. By the time Chuck reached his apartment, he had made a decision that would change everything. He was done looking for work, done subjecting himself to the humiliation of age discrimination, and done pretending that his experience and dedication mattered in a world that valued youth over wisdom and potential over proven capability. Chuck Williams was ready to disappear from a job market that had made it clear he was no longer welcome. The phone call started 3 hours after Chuck arrived home from the disastrous meeting at Tech Solutions Plus. The first was from Michael, his voice tight with anger and frustration. "Dad, I just wanted to let you know that I talked to David after you left. I told him in no uncertain terms that what happened in that conference room was unacceptable and probably illegal. Chuck sat in his worn recliner, still wearing his interview suit, feeling emotionally drained from the morning's humiliation. "Michael, what did he say?" He tried to defend the team's questions as legitimate business concerns, but I called him out on the age discrimination. Marcus's comments about old men and charity cases were completely out of line, and everyone knows it. "Did you accomplish anything besides making enemies?" Michael was quiet for a moment. "Dad, I don't care if I made enemies. What they did to you was wrong, and somebody needed to say it." Chuck felt a mixture of pride in his son's loyalty and concern for the professional consequences Michael might face. "Son, I appreciate you standing up for me, but I don't want this to hurt your career. My career isn't worth protecting, if it means working with people who would treat my father like that." The second call came an hour later from Dorothy in Atlanta, who had spoken with Michael and was furious about the treatment her brother had received. "Chuck, that boy is right. What those people did was discrimination, plain and simple. You should file a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. I'm 54 years old, and I've been unemployed for 18 months. Do you really think I have the energy or resources to fight a legal battle with a tech company? I think you have the right to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of your age. Rights and reality are two different things. The reality is that I'm too old for the modern job market, and today just confirmed what I already knew." Dorothy's voice grew more concerned. "Chuck, you're starting to sound defeated, and that's not like you. Maybe defeat is the appropriate response when you've been beaten." That evening, Chuck received an unexpected call from David Chen at Tech Solutions Plus. "Mr. Davis, I wanted to reach out personally to discuss what happened today. I feel like the meeting didn't go as well as any of us hoped." Chuck appreciated the call, but wasn't interested in diplomatic explanations. "Mr. Chen, what happened today was that your team made it clear that they consider me too old and too set in my ways to be a valuable employee. There's not much to discuss beyond that. Mr. Davis, I want you to know that some of the comments made today don't reflect the company's official position on age and experience. We value diversity in all its forms, including generational diversity. But you're not going to hire me." David was quiet for a moment. "We've decided to continue our search for candidates who might be a better fit for our specific technical requirements." Which is a polite way of saying you're going to hire someone younger. It's a way of saying we're looking for the best candidate for this particular position. After ending the call, Chuck sat in his darkened apartment and confronted the full scope of his situation. He was 54 years old with limited savings, no prospects for employment, and a son whose career might be damaged by his attempts to help his father. The following morning brought a call from Michael that confirmed Chuck's worst fears about the professional consequences of the previous day's events. "Dad, I need to tell you what happened after you left yesterday. David called me into his office for what he called a clearing the air conversation." Chuck felt his stomach tighten. "What did he say?" "He said that my emotional reaction to the meeting raised questions about my professional judgment and my ability to separate personal relationships from business decisions. Michael, I'm so sorry. This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. Dad, don't apologize. I'm not sorry I defended you, but I need you to know that my position here might be in jeopardy. David made it clear that my outburst yesterday was seen as unprofessional and that there will be consequences." Chuck felt the weight of guilt settling over him like a physical burden. His son's career was being threatened because of his failed job interview, because of his age, because of his very existence as a father who needed help. What kind of consequences? I don't know yet. But David mentioned that they're reviewing my role and considering whether I'm the right fit for a management position that requires objective decision-making. Chuck closed his eyes and felt 18 months of accumulated disappointment crystallize into a moment of absolute clarity. His presence in his son's life had become a liability rather than an asset. His need for employment had put Michael's career at risk. His very existence as an aging father had created problems that his successful son didn't deserve to inherit. "Michael, I want you to do something for me." "What's that, Dad?" "I want you to go to David and apologize for your reaction yesterday. Tell him that you recognize your response was emotional and unprofessional and that it won't happen again." "Dad, I'm not going to apologize for defending you against discrimination." "Yes, you are. Because your career is more important than my wounded pride." "That's not true, and you know it." Chuck's voice grew firmer. "Michael, you have a wife, a mortgage, and a future to protect. I'm a 54-year-old man who's been unemployed for 18 months and who apparently has no realistic prospects for employment. Don't sacrifice your success for my failures." "Dad, you haven't failed. The system has failed you. The result is the same either way. And I won't let my problems destroy your future." The conversation ended with Michael reluctantly agreeing to consider apologizing to David, though Chuck could hear in his son's voice that he remained conflicted about abandoning his father's defense. Over the next week, Chuck watched his son navigate the professional fallout from their shared humiliation. Michael reported that his colleagues were treating him differently, that his opinions were being questioned more frequently, and that he was being excluded from certain meetings and decisions. "They're freezing me out, Dad. Not openly, but subtly. I can feel the change in how I'm perceived. And you understand now why I wanted you to apologize. I understand that the business world can be cruel and unfair, but I don't regret standing up for you." Chuck made a decision that felt both inevitable and heartbreaking. He couldn't continue to be a source of professional liability for his son, and he couldn't continue to subject himself to the humiliation of age discrimination in a job market that had clearly decided he was obsolete. Chuck wrote a letter to Michael that took him 3 hours to compose and revise. "Son, I want you to know that I am proud of you for defending me at Tech Solutions Plus, even though it has created problems for your career. Your loyalty and your sense of justice are exactly the qualities I tried to instill in you when you were growing up. But I also want you to understand that I cannot continue to be a burden on your professional life. The incident at your office has made it clear that my age and my employment situation are sources of embarrassment that affect not just me, but the people who care about me. I have decided to stop looking for employment and to accept that my career is over. This is not defeat, it is acceptance of reality. I am going to apply for early Social Security benefits and find ways to live within those means. I will not ask you for financial help, and I will not create situations where you feel obligated to advocate for me in professional settings. I want you to focus on your own career and your own family without worrying about your unemployed father. You have given me the greatest gift a father can receive, the knowledge that I raised a son with character and integrity. That is enough for me. I love you and I am proud of you, and I want you to succeed without the burden of my problems weighing you down." Chuck sealed the letter and mailed it the next morning, then spent the day researching early Social Security benefits and low-income housing options. By evening, he had created a survival plan that would allow him to maintain his independence without relying on Michael's support or subjecting himself to further employment humiliation. When Michael called that evening, Chuck could hear the pain in his son's voice. "Dad, I got your letter. You can't just give up like this." "I'm not giving up, Michael. I'm accepting reality. I'm 54 years old in a job market that values youth over experience. Fighting that reality has cost me 18 months of dignity and has now put your career at risk. Enough is enough. Dad, there are laws against age discrimination. There are resources available. There are other companies that might value your experience. And there are also bills to pay and rent to meet and groceries to buy, while I chase fantasies about companies that might see past my age to my capabilities." Chuck's voice grew gentler as he continued. "Michael, you defended me when your colleagues attacked me, and I will never forget that. But now, I need you to defend your own future. Go to David. Apologize for your emotional response and rebuild your professional relationships. Don't let my problems become your problems." The conversation ended with Michael's reluctant promise to consider Chuck's advice, though both father and son understood that their relationship had been fundamentally changed by the events at Tech Solutions Plus. Chuck had learned that even the most successful and well-intentioned children couldn't protect their parents from a world that discarded older workers as casually as it discarded outdated technology. And Michael had learned that loyalty to family sometimes came at a professional cost that successful people were rarely prepared to pay. As Chuck prepared for bed that night, he felt something approaching peace for the first time in months. He had stopped fighting a battle he couldn't win, accepted a reality he couldn't change, and freed his son from the burden of having a father who needed more help than a successful young man could provide without risking his own future. The job market had won, age discrimination had triumphed, and Chuck Williams was ready to disappear from a professional world that had made it clear he was no longer welcome. But sometimes, surrender can lead to unexpected forms of victory, and sometimes stepping away from a rigged game allows you to find better ways to measure your worth and contribution to the world. 3 months after Chuck had resigned himself to early retirement and the humiliation at Tech Solutions Plus, he sat in the community room of the East Cleveland Senior Center, surrounded by 12 other men and women over 50 who had gathered for what had become a weekly support group for displaced workers. What had started as Chuck's attempt to find community among people who understood his struggles had evolved into something more significant, a grassroots organization that was making a real difference in people's lives. "Chuck, I wanted to thank you again for helping me navigate the unemployment system," said Marie Rodriguez, a former bank manager who had lost her job when her branch closed. "Without your guidance, I never would have understood all the benefits I was entitled to." Chuck smiled at Marie, feeling the satisfaction that came from helping others, even when he couldn't help himself. "Marie, you earned those benefits through 23 years of hard work. All I did was help you understand the system." The support group had become Chuck's lifeline during the dark months after his decision to stop seeking employment. He had discovered that his decades of supervisory experience translated perfectly to helping other displaced workers navigate the complex maze of unemployment benefits, job retraining programs, and social services available to people over 50. "Chuck," said James Patterson, a former steelworker, "I've got good news. That construction company you connected me with called yesterday. They want me to start Monday as a site supervisor." The room erupted in applause, and Chuck felt a warmth in his chest that he hadn't experienced since his factory days. James was the 7th member of their group to find employment with Chuck's help over the past 2 months. "James, that's wonderful news. You're going to be great at that job. I never would have heard about the opportunity if you hadn't connected me with that contractor network you found." Chuck had indeed discovered something unexpected during his months of retirement. His experience with manufacturing, his understanding of workplace safety, and his natural ability to connect with people had made him an informal employment coordinator for older workers in the Cleveland area. Word had spread through community centers, churches, and social service agencies that Chuck Williams was someone who could help displaced workers find opportunities that traditional job placement services often overlooked. "Chuck," said Patricia Washington, a former office manager, "I wanted to update you on the grocery store position. I start training next week, and they said they were specifically looking for someone with management experience who could help train younger employees. Chuck nodded with satisfaction. Patricia, you're going to bring so much value to that operation. They're lucky to have you. The support group meeting continued for another hour, with members sharing job search successes, discussing interview strategies, and providing emotional support for the challenges of job hunting after 50. Chuck found himself in the role of informal counselor, advocate, and resource coordinator, roles that utilized all of his supervisory skills without requiring him to subject himself to the age discrimination of formal employment. After the meeting ended, Chuck was approached by Sandra Williams, the director of the East Cleveland Senior Center. "Chuck, I wanted to talk to you about something exciting. I just got off the phone with a representative from the Cuyahoga County Workforce Development Board. They're interested in funding a formal program based on what you've been doing here." Chuck looked surprised. "Oh, what kind of program?" "They want to create a pilot initiative called Experience Works that would provide job placement services specifically for workers over 50. They've heard about your success in helping people find employment, and they want you to coordinate the program." Chuck felt a mixture of excitement and skepticism. "Sandra, that sounds wonderful in theory, but I'm not sure I'm qualified to run a formal program." "Chuck, you've helped 15 people find employment in 3 months. You've created a support network that's keeping dozens of people motivated and connected. You've identified employer networks that specifically value experienced workers. How is that not qualified?" Chuck considered Sandra's words. Over the past 3 months, he had indeed developed an informal system for matching older workers with employers who valued experience over youth. He had built relationships with small business owners, contractors, and service companies who appreciated the reliability and work ethic that older employees brought to their operations. What would this program involve? It would be a part-time coordinator position, funded by federal workforce development grants. You'd work 20 hours a week, helping older workers access job placement services, training opportunities, and employer networks. The salary isn't huge, but it would provide health insurance and a sense of purpose. Chuck felt something he hadn't experienced in months: excitement about professional possibilities. "Sandra, I'm interested, but I need to understand something. This wouldn't be charity, would it? This would be based on the results I've achieved and the value I can bring to the program." "Chuck, the county officials I spoke with were impressed by the data. 15 job placements in 3 months, with an average time to employment of 6 weeks. That's better than most traditional job placement services achieve with any age group." That evening, Chuck called Michael to share the unexpected opportunity. Their relationship had slowly begun to heal over the past few months, though it remained somewhat strained by the aftermath of the Tech Solutions Plus incident. "Dad, that sounds incredible," Michael said, after Chuck described the program opportunity. "It's exactly the kind of work you were meant to do. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I wanted to get your thoughts. Do you think this sounds legitimate?" "Dad, you've proven that you can help people find employment. You've created value where none existed before. This isn't charity. This is recognition of your capabilities." Chuck appreciated his son's support, but he sensed something hesitant in Michael's voice. "How are things going at Tech Solutions Plus?" Michael was quiet for a moment. "Actually, Dad, I have some news about that. I've been offered a position with a different company, a startup that develops software for manufacturing operations. It's a significant step up in responsibility and salary." "That's wonderful, Michael. Congratulations." "Thanks, Dad. But I need to tell you something. Part of the reason I'm leaving Tech Solutions Plus is because of what happened with your interview. The atmosphere there never really recovered for me after I defended you." I realized I didn't want to work for a company that would treat people the way they treated you. Chuck felt a complicated mixture of pride in his son's integrity and guilt about the professional cost of that integrity. Michael, I hope you're not making this decision because of me. I'm making it because of the values you taught me. The startup I'm joining specifically values diversity of experience and perspective. The founder is actually a former manufacturing engineer who understands the value of bringing different backgrounds together. 2 weeks later, Chuck was officially hired as the coordinator for the Experience Works pilot program. His first day at the Cuyahoga County Workforce Development Office felt surreal after months of believing his working life was over. Chuck's new office was small but professional, with a desk, computer and phone system that connected him to a network of social service agencies, employer associations, and training programs throughout the Cleveland area. For the first time in nearly 2 years, Chuck had business cards with his name and title: Charles Davis, Senior Workers Coordinator, Experience Works Program. "Chuck," said his supervisor, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, "I want you to know that this program exists because of the success you've already demonstrated. We're not asking you to change what you've been doing. We're asking you to expand it and formalize it." Chuck's first official case was Dorothy Thompson, a 56-year-old former retail manager who had been unemployed for 14 months. Dorothy reminded Chuck of himself, experienced, capable, but repeatedly rejected by employers who saw her age as a liability rather than an asset. "Ms. Thompson, tell me about your experience and what kind of work you're looking for." "Mr. Davis, I managed a department store for 18 years. I know retail operations, inventory management, customer service, and staff training. But every interview I go to, they take one look at me and decide I'm overqualified or that I wouldn't fit their culture." Chuck recognized Dorothy's frustration and discouragement. "Ms. Thompson, I understand exactly what you're experiencing. Let me ask you this. Are you open to opportunities that might not be traditional retail management, but that would use your skills in different ways?" Over the next hour, Chuck learned about Dorothy's experience with training new employees, her knowledge of inventory systems, and her ability to work with diverse populations. By the end of their meeting, Chuck had identified 3 potential opportunities that matched Dorothy's skills with employers who specifically valued experience. "Ms. Thompson, I want you to consider a training coordinator position with a medical supply company. They need someone to train new warehouse staff, and they specifically want someone with management experience who can teach both technical skills and professional behavior." Dorothy's eyes lit up with interest. "That sounds perfect. When can I interview?" "I'll call them this afternoon and set up a meeting for tomorrow." Chuck's success with Dorothy was replicated throughout his first month in the program. He placed 6 workers in permanent positions and connected 12 others with training programs that led to employment opportunities. His approach was different from traditional job placement services because he understood both the challenges older workers faced and the value they could bring to employers who were willing to look past age stereotypes. Chuck's most significant success came with a 58-year-old former auto plant supervisor named Robert Jenkins, who had been unemployed for 2 years and was on the verge of filing for early Social Security benefits. "Mr. Jenkins, I know this feels hopeless, but I want you to consider something. Your experience with lean manufacturing and quality control is exactly what small manufacturers need to compete in today's market." Chuck connected Robert with a family-owned metal fabrication company that was struggling with quality issues and production efficiency. The company's young owner was initially skeptical about hiring an older worker, but Chuck's advocacy and Robert's demonstrated expertise during the interview process convinced them to offer him a position as production consultant. "Chuck," Robert said during a follow-up call 6 weeks after his hire, "this company had no idea how valuable my experience would be. I've helped them reduce defects by 40% and increase production efficiency by 25%. They're already talking about making me a full-time operations manager." Chuck's success with the Experience Works program began attracting attention beyond Cuyahoga County. He was invited to speak at workforce development conferences, consulted with other communities looking to create similar programs, and featured in news articles about innovative approaches to addressing age discrimination in employment. The most meaningful recognition came 6 months after Chuck started the program, when he received a call from an unexpected source. "Mr. Davis, this is David Chen from Tech Solutions Plus. I hope you remember me." Chuck felt his jaw tighten at the memory of his humiliation in David's conference room. "I remember you, Mr. Chen. Mr. Davis, I called because I've been following the news coverage of your work with displaced older workers, and I wanted to reach out to you personally." Chuck waited, unsure where this conversation was heading. "Mr. Davis, I owe you an apology. What happened in our office that day was wrong, and it reflected poorly on our company's values. The comments made by my staff were inappropriate and discriminatory, and I should have stopped them immediately." Chuck was surprised by David's directness. "I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Chen. Mr. Davis, I'm calling because I'd like to discuss the possibility of Tech Solutions Plus partnering with your Experience Works program. We've realized that our company would benefit from the kind of experienced leadership and institutional knowledge that older workers bring to organizations." Chuck felt a satisfaction that went beyond simple vindication. "Mr. Chen, I'd be happy to discuss ways that your company could participate in our program. We have many qualified candidates who could bring value to technology companies." "Actually, Mr. Davis, I was hoping we could discuss something more specific. We have a facilities management position that would be perfect for someone with your background and experience. Would you be interested in interviewing for it?" Chuck smiled, thinking about the irony of the situation. 6 months ago, he had been humiliated and rejected by this company. Now they were recruiting him for the same type of position, but this time they were coming to him as supplicants rather than judges. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not looking for employment. I'm quite happy with my current position helping other people find the opportunities that they deserve." "I understand, Mr. Davis, but if you ever change your mind, or if you have candidates from your program who might be interested, please know that our company has learned from our mistakes and is committed to valuing experience as well as technical skills." After ending the call, Chuck sat in his office and reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought him to this moment. The humiliation at Tech Solutions Plus had led to his resignation from job searching, which had led to his involvement with the support group, which had led to his discovery of his gift for helping older workers find employment, which had led to his current position as a respected coordinator in a successful program. Chuck had learned that sometimes the worst defeats can lead to the most meaningful victories, that sometimes being rejected for the wrong reasons can help you discover the right purpose, and that sometimes the most important work is not the work you get paid to do, but the work you feel called to do. That evening, Chuck called Michael to share the news about David Chen's call. "Dad, that's incredible, and also deeply ironic. It's validation that the work I'm doing has value, and that companies are starting to recognize the importance of age diversity in their workforce. Dad, I want you to know that I'm proud of what you've built. You took a terrible experience and turned it into something that's helping hundreds of people. That's exactly the kind of character I hope I inherited from you." 6 months later, Chuck stood before an audience of 200 workforce development professionals at a national conference in Washington, D.C., delivering a keynote speech about innovative approaches to addressing age discrimination in employment. The title of his presentation was "From Rejection to Redemption: How Displaced Workers Can Become Community Assets." "Ladies and gentlemen," Chuck began, "18 months ago, I was a 54-year-old unemployed factory worker who had been rejected by dozens of employers because they saw my age as a liability rather than an asset. Today, I coordinate a program that has helped over 150 workers over 50 find meaningful employment." Chuck told the story of his own journey, from the factory closing to the humiliation at Tech Solutions Plus, to his discovery of his calling as an advocate for older workers. "The lesson I've learned is that age discrimination is real, it's painful, and it's costly, not just for individual workers, but for our entire economy. But I've also learned that experienced workers have tremendous value to offer, and that the right programs can help them find employers who recognize that value." The speech was met with sustained applause and led to consulting opportunities with workforce development agencies across the country. Chuck's Experience Works model was being replicated in 15 cities, and he had been appointed to a federal task force on age discrimination in employment. But the most meaningful moment came when Chuck received a letter from Dorothy Thompson, the former retail manager who had been his first official client. "Dear Chuck, I wanted to update you on my progress since our meeting last year. Not only did I get the training coordinator position you helped me find, but I've been promoted to operations manager. More importantly, I've been able to help the company create a mentorship program that pairs experienced workers with younger employees. We're now actively recruiting workers over 50 because we've seen how much value they bring to our operations. Thank you for helping me rediscover my worth and for showing me that my experience was an asset, not a liability." Dean. Chuck kept Dorothy's letter on his desk as a reminder that his work was changing lives in ways that extended far beyond simple job placement. He was helping people rediscover their value, showing employers the benefits of age diversity, and creating a model that other communities could use to address the waste of talent that occurred when experienced workers were discarded simply because of their age. 2 years after the humiliation at Tech Solutions Plus, Chuck Williams had become a nationally recognized expert on workforce development for older workers. He had testified before Congress about age discrimination, consulted with major corporations about inclusive hiring practices, and helped create federal legislation supporting employment programs for workers over 50. The man who had been told he was too old and too set in his ways to be valuable had become one of the most innovative and effective advocates for older workers in the country. The experience that had seemed like his greatest professional failure had become the foundation for his most meaningful career success. Chuck had learned that sometimes the most important victories come not from getting what you want, but from discovering what you're truly meant to do. His rejection by the modern job market had led him to create new pathways for people who faced the same discrimination he had experienced. On a warm spring afternoon, Chuck received a call from Marcus, the young man who had made the "old men" comment that had been so hurtful during his interview at Tech Solutions Plus. "Mr. Davis, this is Marcus Williams from Tech Solutions Plus. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to call and apologize for the terrible things I said during your interview 2 years ago." Chuck was surprised by the call, but curious about Marcus's motivation. "Marcus, I appreciate you calling. What prompted this apology?" "Mr. Davis, my father just turned 55, and he lost his job 6 months ago. He's been struggling to find employment, and I've watched him go through exactly what you must have experienced. I finally understand how cruel and ignorant my comments were." Marcus's voice was filled with genuine remorse. "Mr. Davis, I want you to know that your son Michael was right to defend you that day, and I was wrong to dismiss your experience and qualifications because of your age. Marcus, I accept your apology, and I want you to know that if your father needs help navigating the job market for older workers, our Experience Works program might be able to assist him." "Mr. Davis, that's incredibly generous of you, especially after how I treated you." "Marcus, helping your father wouldn't be generous. It would be exactly what this program was created to do. Every experienced worker deserves to be judged on their capabilities rather than their age." As Chuck ended the call, he reflected on the complete transformation of his life over the past 2 years. The humiliation that had seemed so devastating at the time had become the catalyst for work that was more meaningful and impactful than anything he had done during his decades in manufacturing. Chuck Williams had learned that sometimes the greatest gift life can give you is the opportunity to turn your worst experience into your most important contribution to the world. The rejection he had faced because of his age had led him to create opportunities for hundreds of others who faced the same discrimination. The man who had been told he was nothing but an old man had become a champion for the value and dignity of older workers everywhere, and in helping others rediscover their worth, Chuck had found his own purpose and redemption.